Hello, my name is Stephen Rea, and I'm going to be presenting on the evolution of human teeth and jawbone. So, just as an introduction, I just wanted to start out by giving a little bit of anatomy, just for reference, so you guys are aware. So, really, you can divide the tooth into two subsections: the crown here and the root down here. So the crown is actually going to be what's vitally used and what is seen, and the root is what lies underneath the gum line. So the enamel is this first hard surface. One of the interesting things about the enamel is that it's actually the hardest surface in the human body. And so, but it is also highly mineralized, and that's what causes a lot of its strength. But one of the things with it being 96% mineralized, you find that with that strength also comes its brittleness, and so it's kind of a double-edged sword there. That it is one of the hardest, but it also can crack. And so one of the ways that we've seen through evolution that that it's kind of counteracted this has been this secondary layer here, this dentin. It's much softer and actually helps support the enamels from breaking and cracking whenever we end up using it. And then finally, right in here, this kind of pinky red center is the pulp. And you find that it's made up mostly of connective tissue, and it has a lot of the neurovascular innervation. So a lot of the nerves and veins and arteries are actually coming through here and supplying the tooth to be able to live and support a happy life. So here, I just want to kind of go over this briefly, the different anatomical surfaces of the tooth, just so that we're on the same page. So first, I'll just say that the mesial surface, that's this front surface here. What that really is how you can tell the difference is it's kind of the anterior, the front of the molar here. The distal, in retrospect, is the posterior side, and then the lingual or is actually going to be the side with the tongue. So it's going to be more medial, and then the lateral side is called the buccal or even facial surface. So it's going to be closer to the cheek. And then finally, I think probably the most important one to know is the occlusal or biting surface. And so that's really important just for the fact that you see a lot of dental cavities actually end up finding its way here just because of the different grooves and the cusps that are actually on the molars. So since I'm talking about the evolution of the teeth and jawbone from our ancient ancestors, I figured I'd kind of list some of the characteristics of them in these early hominid ancestors. So first of all, they had a lot larger teeth. And so you can actually see here with this comparison between one of our older relatives and one of our closer relatives, you can see that the size is quite stark. And in this picture here, you can see that there's the mandible is also quite large. And then, especially with this picture here, you can see a little bit here, but mainly in this one, you can see that there's these teeth are just insanely flat. Now, I mean, some of that comes with time and age and stuff, but they found that overall their teeth are actually much flatter. Um, and so a lot of that has to do with the diet, which we'll kind of get into here in a bit. Just talking about the need for this type of shape of tooth. So here are the characteristics of the modern teeth. So we find that they're much smaller in comparison, as we kind of mentioned before, along with a smaller jaw, and then also you see that with this overall shrinking of the mouth, you find that there is actually some vestigial third molars, or what we call wisdom teeth. So you can actually see them here. It's number 1, 16, 17, and 32. Those are our wisdom teeth. And you can see that through evolution, there's not much need for them anymore. A lot of it was pretty crucial for our ancient ancestors in processing a lot of their plant foods and grinding it up. But we don't really need to process that anymore. And with the smaller size, it actually kind of ends up being a nuisance, and a lot of people end up getting them removed. And so, along with this shrinking of the mouth, we find that there's a crooked formation, just because we still have the same number of teeth, but a smaller surface to fill them all. And then the other interesting thing was that you find that there was actually a higher amount of bacteria present, we believe, through a lot of the research that I found, that just shows that that we believe that based on the dietary changes, there's a stark difference in the bacteria. So, getting into the role of diet on this evolution of the mouth, we find that early hominid diets really were pretty plant based overall, and so a lot of them were scavenging and finding their own plants to eat, as well as meat as they started to hunt. And they needed these flat teeth to be able to process a lot of this food. We also see that as we've talked about these last few weeks, the element of cooking really had an effect too on the evolution of the mouth, just because cooking made the food a lot easier to process and digest in the body and in the gut. So we find that this evolution actually started taking place when this cooking started to happen. But we find that in modern human diets, we started to actually farm and grow our own foods, which was very different to scavenging. So with that comes a lot of processed grains, a lot of processed foods, and with that kind of opens up its own problems. So these processed foods are actually high in sugar and help aid these bacteria to flourish. And as they continually grow in their numbers and their populations are increased in our teeth, we find that their byproduct of acid actually helps break down the enamel of our teeth, which is obviously really bad. That's what our cavities are. And so a lot of times when we think about the difference between early hominids and on our teeth, we think that we had it much better. But a lot of this research is actually showing that our ancestors actually had it seems, a better teeth and oral health than we do today, which is kind of a little sad. So bacteria, if you've taken any microbiology classes, you know a little bit about the normal flora. It's just the bacteria that naturally are growing on our body, and they can either, in symbiosis, they can kind of help aid in a lot of the processes of digestion, and also fighting off the bad bacteria. But some of these bad bacteria, I have a few listed here. The Streptococcus mutans is actually responsible for that tooth decay and producing that acid byproduct. So it's pretty bad. And then this one here is also found with individuals with gum disease. And so you see that there are plenty of examples of bad bacteria that are actually starting to be in a larger number as our history has kind of been going forth with the human race. But the good bacteria is kind of acts as our first line of defense. And one of the interesting things is this new bacteria that was newly discovered actually pretty recently, the A12, actually helps fight this S mutants that helps that breaks down the tooth. And so it actually produces some byproducts of its own that are pretty basic and actually end up neutralizing some of these acids that are on the teeth and helping. So in conclusion, basically as our lifestyles and our diet had changed, we find that our size of our mouths have changed as well. And with this size change, we find that there were different things that were present back in the day that aren't really so necessary anymore, like wisdom teeth, and new forms of bacteria are kind of changing that old way, that old balance in our microbiome. So that can be kind of bad. So some of the things overall to help to balance out this kind of fight between the good and bad bacteria is to brush twice a day, to floss daily, and to also receive cleanings from your local dentist. But two other things that I found in research that I thought was kind of interesting was that you can cut back on sugary diets just because that sugar does help aid those bad bacteria to flourish. And then also to stay hydrated because a dry mouth can actually help provide a hospitable atmosphere for that bad bacteria. And then here are my references. Thanks for listening to my presentation. I hope you guys have a good rest of the semester.